Houston Real Estate Radio starts right now.
Welcome back. You're listening to Houston Real Estate Radio. If you missed any of today's show, you can join us at HoustonRealEstateRadio.com and watch the videos of today's show and get more information. If you'd like to call in a real estate question, you can give us a call at 281-882-8088, and we'll be happy to answer your real estate questions on the air. We're actually going to be answering some later in the show today. So last segment, we were talking with David Gornet about the Grand Parkway. And, you know, I think the Grand Parkway, it's always a topic of discussion because it's kind of ever-changing. You always hear a lot about it. But the Grand Parkway, I think there's a little bit of misconception about it. Some people think it's going to be another loop around the city. But it's you were saying earlier, it's not really a loop. So tell us about the overall Grand Parkway, the vision of it.
The vision of the Grand Parkway is to be another loop, but it's not a complete loop. We start down in Galveston County in the San Leon area, going over to I-45 near League City, on around south of Alvin to 288, and on around town to 59, I-10, 290, 249, 45, 59 north, US 90, I-10, and back to 146 in the Baytown area. It's a large C. It's going to be about 184 miles going around in that loop. Since it's not been built yet, we don't have a final distance yet. The environmental and engineering studies are ongoing on a number of the segments, so as those are refined, we'll refine that mileage. I don't see it changing much more than it currently is. But it's supposed to be a 4-lane highway all the way around town. As we were talking earlier, it's going to end up being a toll road, not a free road. That way we can pay for it with our tolls. But it'll give you a chance to drive around the metropolitan Houston. It'll serve for folks that want to bypass driving through downtown. Mm-hmm. It'll serve all those growing communities that are coming around out in the suburbs. Right. It'll provide hurricane evacuation for those citizens that have their beach houses down in Galveston, or people that live permanently in Galveston, southern Brazoria County. As they come up into town, and we saw this during Hurricane Ike or
that
Hurricane
was a nightmare.
Rita.
Sitting in traffic for 8-10 hours.
It was terrible, but those folks need to be getting out of harm's way.
Sure.
And the city of Houston stays here. We still drive around, and the people were at their offices working in Houston until the day before the storm, whereas 3 and 4 days beforehand, they're evacuating Galveston and Brazoria County. Mm-hmm. So those folks will have an alternative. They can take the Grand Parkway around town, not try to go through downtown Houston to try to get out of harm's way. So there's a number of functions that the Grand Parkway ends up providing, and that's why we're looking at this. Here, it's happening quickly. We've had the piece from Sugarland to Katy open since '94, almost 20 years. This year, from I-10 to 290 is going to be opened in late 2013. And then 3 years from now, from 290 to 249 to 45 to 59 north will be open. So by the end of 2015, you'll be able to drive from US 59 south in Sugarland to 59 north in New Caney without going through a stoplight.
It's a little more scenic, too, than your normal state highway.
It's being developed without continuous frontage roads, unlike 45 or, say, 290 that has the feeder roads along it mm-hmm. that provide access to those adjacent properties. The Grand Parkway the concept is more of a parkway. Many of the areas you go through, you have landscape reserves adjacent to the highway. We're getting a little wider right-of-way so that we can leave some of that natural landscaping on the border of the highway, and then you have the highway, and that'll buffer it from the adjacent land use, whether it's a subdivision, a school, a park, an office right. complex. You've got that buffer. And without the continuous frontage roads, you don't have that strip of denser urban development that occurs along it with the shopping centers and apartment complexes and such.
When it's completed, will the whole thing be referred to as State Highway 99, or will it, like 610 East, 610 West, or will it have different, be named more for the segments? How is that going to work?
I'm going to expect that it'll be called the Grand Parkway.
Okay.
And now local areas, mm-hmm. If everybody in Dayton starts calling it who knows what, the Dayton Highway. They may call it the Dayton Highway, but it will be designated State Highway 99. The state's already designated the entire loop, and that's the way we're developing it and getting it approved with the environmental documents of State Highway 99, but it could have different names as it goes around.
All right. And cutting through the new Springwoods community up here by the new Exxon that's going in. Tell us about that. How much did Exxon have to do with this new part of the Grand Parkway coming through? Because a few years ago, we didn't hear a whole lot about it, but ever since Exxon's been coming this way, we've heard a lot about it. Was that a big impact on it, or was it always going to...
Well, the Grand Parkway was always going through that. We were looking for routes. Our charge is to try to avoid and minimize impacts. Mm-hmm. And while folks in Spring will say I did a poor job of avoiding impacts, some folks, I myself, our consultants, the state have worked to avoid as many impacts as we can. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways you do that is by going through undeveloped properties. And in those properties, you've got to avoid wetlands and things like that. But we were already had routes drawn. We've been working on that segment since 1999. We held our first public meetings in 2004. We had follow-up public meetings in 2006 that had that alignment shown on it there. Mm-hmm. And so as Exxon, being a smart company, if they decide that they want to look for a site that's got good access, this was all public information. They may well have said, oh, that works for us. Mm-hmm. The landowner there of the Springwoods, the property that is now being called Springwoods, mm-hmm. they've owned that land for 50-some years, I'm told, since the 1960s. Mm-hmm. And so they were able to market it like, hey, we've got the Grand Parkway being planned going through here. It's going to be a good thing. So why don't you develop your company out here? So Exxon didn't have anything to do with this is where the highway's going. It was already planned to go in that location. Is it beneficial that as the state's building it, that Exxon's doing this big development? Certainly it is, mm-hmm. because that will mean more people are there. There are going to be people there that are going to be willing to use the highway to pay the toll to get to where they live now in Katy or sure. Toward Kingwood or something like that. So it's going to end up being very beneficial to the state that Exxon chose to put their site there. It's beneficial to Exxon because that way they know their people will have good mobility.
All right. And you said it is definitely going through that Springwoods community?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. And I know there is a lot of wetland in that area. So are those going to be overpasses or they'll be road streets?
At wetlands at wetlands, we'll have to avoid them. We've avoided as many as we can, or okay. where we fill those in, we either bridge them or we have to put fill in there, in which case we have to compensate for that and create some new wetlands elsewhere at a wetlands mitigation bank.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
And it's good.
It gets complicated.
It is complicated, but you can take some of these isolated wetlands that may be relatively small, piece them together with others, and the bank will then provide a larger area of contiguous wetlands that give you a good habitat. It's something that the Corps of Engineers has been pushing for to try to consolidate all that into larger spaces rather than have some of these isolated ones. One
of the things that we hear about a lot in our Houston area is the amount of pollution and smog. So many children now have asthma, and they say that it's because of all this air pollution and smog. From a transportation standpoint, how do you feel about that? Do you think that that's going to get better in the years to come, worse? Do you think that it is impacted because of our traffic in the area?
Certainly, we have. But pollution and smog comes from multiple sources. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think our traffic does have an impact. You or I sitting in rush hour traffic with our cars idling does create more pollution. So our goal is to get people to move to smooth that out so that we can drive around without sitting and wasting time, wasting gas, and causing that pollution. We can move more quickly around the metropolitan area. That's one way of one thing that new transportation facilities will do for you. Whether it's the county adding a turn lane at a traffic light so you have less people sitting there waiting for their chance to turn left.
Right.
Same thing, building a new highway. As we talked in our previous segment about allowing people more choices to, instead of driving all the way in 45 and sitting in some of that traffic, they can get off on the Grand Parkway and get to their destination more quickly. That's less pollution that's being generated, and so the new highway will have a positive impact on that. But in general, I think our pollution is going down, in part because our cars are getting better, and as we phase those older vehicles off the road, that aren't up to the same standards of newer vehicles, as that fleet goes off, we'll have better vehicles on the road that generate less pollution. The growth of Houston is continuing to happen. We have more people coming to town. That means more cars. So we need to respond to that. And I think the city, the county, the state are all working in very positive ways to help address our mobility as well as to address the pollution that we have faced in the past. It's better now. We have fewer days of ozone exceedance than we used to, and let's hope that we can continue to make it better.
Absolutely. So tell me, I have a couple quick questions for you. What is the completion date projected to be for the entire project for the Grand Parkway?
Well, unfortunately, my crystal
there
ball
not
is
one?
pretty dark on that. I can tell you these 3 segments, 4 segments, E, F1, F2, and G as well, and what Fort Bend County is doing down on segment D, that's all going to be done pretty soon.
Okay.
On the other side, from going from 59 north to I-10 east, and what we refer to as segments H and I-1, right now we are working, the state is working to try to identify funding opportunities so that they could implement that and have it open to traffic in the 2019 timeframe. There's going to be more people coming out, more trucks coming out of the port, more traffic to and from the port. They feel that by getting that segment in place, we can relieve some of the congestion that might be going through closer to downtown. We can redirect that out to the Grand Parkway, and that having the Parkway in there would be a positive way to minimize that port traffic impact on the urban core of Houston. The segments to the south, segment C from 59 to 288 or segment B from 288 to 45 are much cloudier in when they might be implemented.
Okay.
That we'll have to work on finding the funding. We talked about funding earlier, and that's going to be difficult to identify funding for that, at least in today's environment.
Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of work still ahead of you. All right. Well, if you go to, they have a great website. If you go to grandpky.com, you can get some great information. There's some great maps there, lots of great information on each segment that you can really digest exactly where they are and what's being done. So it's very interesting to look at that. This segment of Houston Real Estate Radio is brought to you by the Perfect Light Landscape Lighting Company. They can help you decorate for any outdoor party or just improve the look of your home or your outdoor living space. You can check them out online at theperfectlight.com. We'll be right back.